Why is that harmful more than helpful? Yeah. Okay, good. We stereotype people, then why is that harmful? Okay, not all stereotypes are true, and what else? It's good. It means we never stop to find out. We never stop to find out. We just assume things about people, our values never change, we don't grow, and our learning stops. And how sad is that? So, this idea that the post-racial ideal, I am obviously an African-American female, which is a very important part of my identity. It's not the only part of my identity, but if someone said, well, I don't see you as black, I say, why not? Why would you deny that part of me? And why would you deny yourself getting to know that part of me? So this idea that we have to transcend race, I see it as more disrespectful, because we still judge people based on race. I wish we didn't, but we do. This idea that we have to get over race. I think we have to work through it. Sorry, the psychologist, I was talking about working through it. Right? But not get over it. Okay? But not get over it. So have things changed since President Obama was elected president? Have things changed? What do we think?
Nope.
How many people say no? Let's take a poll. And how many people say yes? Okay. Yeah, I will say number one, it depends on who you ask. And number two, his election does represent some very powerful things. Never before have we ever elected a racial, ethnic man, woman either, as president. That means something has changed. Something very powerful has changed. But what has changed for people on the ground who deal with the effects of racism every day? Very little. Very little. So something powerful has changed. That is very true. And it does represent a change in attitudes. But laws change quicker than attitudes. We just repealed the anti-miscegenation laws in 1967. That is, laws allowing people to marry interracial. 1967. We were still forcibly segregating schools in the South in the 1970s. The 1970s. It didn't work. Schools are still segregated, just so you know. All right. But, laws change quicker than people's do. People's attitudes do. Right? And if you don't believe me, talk to your grandparents. My grandparents referred to everybody by their ethnic group. Right? They were alive during the Great Depression. Everybody was an ethnic group. That was really important to know. My grandma said, oh, is that person Puerto Rican? I said, I don't know. I thought, why is that important? But it was to her. All right? So we are in the process of transition, which is good, but part of that transition is to create a dialogue and to keep talking when things get hard. Racial issues are painful. There's a lot of shame and guilt and anger around them, and I challenge you to have the guts to stay in the conversation, even though it's painful, even though you don't like what someone's saying, and even though people will challenge your values about what's being said. Right? I will say one more thing, and I will get off the mic so we can turn it over and then allow for some questions. So we just had a horrible incident at Fort Hood, right? Okay, where a Muslim man killed several soldiers. A deep tragedy, right? What do you think will be the backlash now against the Muslim community?
Discrimination.
Okay, discrimination and sometimes even violence and attacks, right? In Orland Park several years ago, if anyone remember this, they were going to build a mosque. Does anyone remember this? Anyone from Orland Park? Okay, what happened when they went to build the mosque?
The mayor got a lot of flack.
Okay, the mayor got a lot of flack, and there were town hall meetings, and it was ugly. I had a student here who lived in Orland Park who was going to be a part of that mosque. A woman walked up to her and said, "It's all your fault, just go home." She said, "I'm from Texas." Why do we think we could say that to people? Texas is home, right? Okay, but the hatred and hostility she felt in the room for building a house of worship, if it was going to be a church, would there be a problem? No. So this sort of pain about differences, and this fear that we feel is dangerous. Okay, is dangerous. Racial profiling is dangerous. Right? If I get pulled over, I usually did it. I speed just a little bit. I probably should admit that I do. Right? If my brother, I have two, my older brother gets pulled over, who is a 6'4" black man who never ever breaks a speeding rule. It's crazy. Okay, gets pulled over, what does he do? What does he do? He puts his hands on the dashboard and is extra polite to the officer. Why?
So the officer doesn't think he's reaching for something.
That's right. That's right. That's dangerous. We're not post-racial. That's the problem with not talking about race. Okay. So the last thing, I probably said the last thing, but the last thing is that a lot of times, if you are a person of color, you will get, if you hear about a violent news story, right, on the news where somebody who looks like you did something, the entire group of you gets judged, whether you want it to or not. African-American man pulls out a gun and kills somebody, my whole group is judged, and I am seen as violent, whether I am or not, even if I didn't know that person. And that is just the way it is. We are not post-racial. And to be post-racial, it shouldn't even be an ideal, because it means we can stop talking about it now, we can move on. And I don't think we can. We're not ready to move on. We're ready to work through, and President Obama's election does represent the working through in some ways, right? So I challenge you to continue the dialogue, right? To not see colorblindness as a positive thing. It is not. In some ways, it denies somebody's identity, or has the potential to do so, and it denies the conversation. Sarah and I are no longer friends, my friend from high school. We couldn't talk about race. I didn't know how to bring it up with her. Later on I would have many friends where we would talk a lot about it. But it's an important part of who I am. Not the only part, but an important part. And to not be able to discuss that part and how it influences me is disrespectful. And therefore we shouldn't have a post-racial ideal. We shouldn't transcend race. We should talk about race and other things as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helm. Thank you all for coming. This is a huge crowd. I'm very excited to offer some theology, some understanding of how this comes and affects our Christian faith and faith in God in general with regard to ideas of race and certainly thoughts and ideal towards a post-racial society. So I begin in prayer. Holy God, fill our minds with truth and our hearts with love. What do I mean by seeking that kind of society within the United States? First and foremost, I would quote Dr. Martin Luther King in saying people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by the quality of their character. We as Christians look profoundly to the